If you flip all the way to the back of the New Testament, right before Revelation, you'll find this short, really fiery, and honestly often forgotten letter, the Epistle of Jude. It's known for its passion, for sure, but a lot of people just skip it because of its strange references and pretty harsh warnings.
And that brings up the big question for this whole explainer. If this letter is so tough and so obscure, why is it even here? Why did it survive when so many other ancient writings were lost to history? Well, to get to that, we've got to face the challenges head on. And there are 4 big hurdles for anyone trying to read Jude today. First, it's incredibly short. We're talking just 25 verses. That's a tiny window into its world. Second, the tone. It's harsh. It focuses a lot on judgment. Third, it's packed with these weird references to other ancient Jewish texts that, let's be honest, most of us have never even heard of. And finally, even the early church wasn't sure what to do with it. They were pretty divided on whether it should be considered scripture at all. So with all of that stacked against it, the question just gets bigger, right? Why is it still in our Bibles? What on earth do those early believers see in this letter that made them think, no, we have to keep this one?
Well, the answer, as it turns out, is that Jude makes 3 absolutely vital contributions to Christian thinking and community life. These are the core reasons this little letter stuck around.
Let's break them down real quick. First, Jude gives this incredibly powerful definition of what God's grace is really for. Second, he shines a spotlight on our accountability to God, especially for leaders. And third, he really hammers home our responsibility to hold each other accountable, right here in the community. Jude's take on grace is pretty radical. For him, grace is not some get-out-of-jail-free card. It's not a free pass to do whatever you feel like. It's the complete opposite. It's the divine power that frees you from your old self and actually transforms you into someone new, someone who can stand blameless before God. To treat it as anything less is to completely twist the whole point of the gift.
And that flows right into his second point, accountability. See, in Jude's world, our actions really matter. They have consequences. He brings up this idea of divine judgment, not to scare people, but as a reminder, especially for those in ministry, that they are accountable for whether they're serving God's purposes or just their own.
So, what was going on that made him write such an urgent message? Well, Jude wasn't just writing this stuff in a vacuum. He was responding to a very real, very specific crisis. The arrival of these dangerous outsiders who had managed to sneak their way into the church.
And he does not pull any punches. In his own words, he says, certain people have wormed their way in. He calls them ungodly people who were transforming the grace of our God into shameless self-indulgence. So this wasn't just some friendly theological debate. This was a direct attack on the integrity of the entire community.
And this right here really illustrates the 2 clashing worldviews. On one side, you have Jude, who saw God's grace as a path to becoming a better, more holy person. And on the other, you have these interlopers who saw grace as a license to indulge themselves and chase after money. One view honors the one who gave the gift. The other, well, it just perverts the gift and breaks that sacred trust. So who were these people anyway? They were probably traveling teachers who just drifted from town to town. They claimed to have special authority from dreams and direct revelations from God. But really, they were what you might call charismatic sponges, just using their charm and influence to get a free ride and make a profit off the community's generosity. And their denial of Jesus wasn't really about what they taught, it was about how they lived, their total disobedience. This brings us to a really crucial question. I mean, to make such a bold stand and call people out like this, the author needed to have some serious authority. So who is the man who actually wrote this letter?
He tells us himself, very specifically. He says he's Jude, a slave of Jesus Christ, and a brother of James. Now, back in that culture, you would only identify yourself by your brother's name if he was incredibly well known. And the most famous James at the time was the leader of the Jerusalem church, which would make the author, Jude, the half-brother of Jesus himself.
But this is where the debate really heats up. For centuries, critics have asked a pretty fair question. Could a simple craftsman from Galilee really write the kind of sophisticated Greek that we see in this letter? It's a valid point, and it's the main reason some scholars have doubts that he was the real author.
Okay, so let's actually weigh the evidence. Critics will point to the fancy Greek and a phrase about remembering the apostles as signs that it was written by someone else, later on. But the source material pushes back pretty hard. For one, Jude's letter doesn't have the typical themes of later Christian writings. And the Greek?
Yeah, the vocabulary is wide, but the sentence structure isn't all that complex. It's totally plausible for a missionary who worked in a multilingual region. And that line about the apostles? The text just says to remember what the apostles said, not to remember them as if they were long gone. So all of this, the crisis, the author, the harsh words, it all builds to a warning that is truly timeless. Because Jude's fight wasn't some isolated incident. He was dealing with a huge challenge that the entire early Christian movement was facing. You have to picture it. The first century church saw this massive explosion of prophecy and charismatic gifts, and that was exciting, but it also created a big problem. The spiritual marketplace was absolutely flooded with self-proclaimed prophets and teachers. How could anyone possibly tell who was the real deal? Well, communities started developing these really practical guides to sort it all out. There's a fascinating early Christian manual called the Didache that gives us a kind of checklist. Test their message. Does it actually line up with the core faith? Test their fruit. Are they selfless or are they just in it for themselves? Test their motives. Are they asking for money while claiming to speak for God? They even had a rule that a traveling prophet couldn't stay more than 3 days, just to keep them from becoming a financial burden. And that right there is the key to understanding Jude. His letter isn't just some angry rant. It's a handbook for community integrity. It's this urgent call for believers to stand firm, to contend for the faith, and to very carefully test the messages, and maybe more importantly, the messengers they welcome into their lives. And that leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Jude's ancient problem feels incredibly modern. We live in a world that is saturated with influencers, gurus, and competing ideologies, all screaming that they have the truth. It makes Jude's challenge echo right down to us today. How do we test the message and the messenger?